So we can go positive here. This can still turn around for me, and I can still say this is so worth it at this point because there's a lot more. There's so many. Happy video day, guys, and today's video is going to be one of you guys' favorite videos on the channel, and I'm so happy that you guys really love this video. This is going to be a Make Up Your Mind. We're going to be talking all about the new Anastasia Beverly Hills released the Amrezy palette. I just heard about this yesterday, and right when I saw it, I said, oh my goodness. It's time to do a Make Up Your Mind because it kind of got me excited. It looks pretty. I know a lot of you guys on my community tab were saying that it looks very redundant to you. You've seen this before. It looks like a combination of a few Anastasia palettes, and I get you because at first I kind of felt that way too, but then I started looking at it more and the whole FOMO thing starts happening and you start really wanting it. And that's what started to happen to me. I said, no, Christina, sit down, look through your collection, and let's see if we can find similar hues in your collection to see if this is even worth it to you. So if you guys are new to this series and you've never seen it before, basically what I do in this series is I go through my collection and I try to find similar hues to brand new released palettes to see if they're worth it for me to pick up. And this is just a quick practice that I would encourage anybody to do before you go out and purchase an eyeshadow palette. I always try to remember myself that eyeshadow palettes do expire. Makeup expires. It's not something you can have forever. So if we're gonna spend our hard-earned money on stuff, let's make sure it's stuff that we don't already have, or that we're buying it over and over and over again. It's also great to be able to actually see the shadows swatched on your arm so you can kind of get an idea if these are colors that you actually dive into a lot or if it's colors that you really don't like to use. So that's what we do in this series, and if you guys like this type of content, I do have an entire playlist that I'm gonna link down below so you guys can see more of these videos after you watch this one. And yeah, we're gonna get into everything. The Amrezy palette, I will tell you guys, there was certain tones in this palette that were not the easiest to find. However, I'm not sure if they're tones that you guys would automatically say are needed, but there is a lot of similarities between a few of the Anastasia previous releases, and yeah, I'm gonna show them to you guys because guys, there is some similarities, and I do feel like I was able to stay within the Anastasia range in order to find a lot of these similar hues. So that's what we're gonna do. So I'm going to show you guys everything in just a minute, but if you guys are new here and you've never met me before, I'm Christina Brooke, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can be part of the family. And also, if you haven't entered into my giveaway, I do have a link down in the description box. That giveaway is going to be ending in a few weeks, so go ahead and join that as well. But let's stop babbling. Let's get into everything. There's more shades in this palette than there typically is in an Anastasia palette, so we've got a lot to talk about, and these took a while to do, guys, so let's get into it right now. And of course, guys, like I always tell you guys, the eye look that I have on my eyes right now is a similar look that you could probably create if you purchase the Amrezy palette, because all the tones that I used on my lids are tones that I actually found in other palettes that look very similar to the Amrezy palette. Like I said, this took me a while to do. I actually did it 2 different times because at first I looked into a few different palettes that I owned. I actually found some similar hues inside of the Metropolis palette, and I also found some similar hues inside of my KKW Beauty Mario palette, but I decided to put those 2 aside and do this one more time using more Anastasia palettes because I did notice that you guys really wanted me to look into the Anastasia palettes. So I redid my swatches and looked a little bit deeper into Anastasia's palettes herself. So I got rid of those 2 and I added in more Anastasia. So in order to find all the hues, I did jump into 3 Anastasia palettes, and that is the Carli Bybel palette. I also jumped into her Modern Renaissance palette, and finally into the Riviera palette. So those are the 3 Anastasia palettes that I jumped into. And because I don't own the Soft Glam, and I do feel like there was a few shades I could have found in the Soft Glam, I threw the Tati Beauty textured neutrals into this because there is a few hues inside of here, and also some of the hues that I found in the Anastasia palettes, I probably could have pulled them from this palette too, but I stayed to Anastasia. So yes, those are the 4 palettes I was able to find a lot of similar hues in, and I will tell you that I did have to mix a few colors to come up with the perfect color. And I feel like even though this new Amrezy palette does look very similar to these 3 palettes, and a lot of you guys have told me that, I do feel like they did try to make the hues different because it wasn't spot on, it wasn't exact. I did have to mix, but That being said, if you do have these palettes, you do have a lot of the colors. So let's go ahead and let's start. Let's start off with the colors that I found. Let me get my book because I have to write this down because I will not remember them. So let's start off with the first color from the Amrezy palette, and that is the color Yugo. If I'm pronouncing these names wrong, sorry. And so that's the first color we're gonna go ahead and go over. And guys, I was able to find a very similar hue, and this one I didn't have to mix or anything. And I did find this hue in multiple palettes. I didn't just find it in this one. So I was able to match this one up pretty closely inside of the Modern Renaissance to this color up here on the top called Cypress Umber. This color here has a very similar undertone to the color that's actually inside of the new Amrezy palette. I do feel like from the swatches, if you have this color, there's not going to be a huge difference on the lids between these two colors. I do feel like the one in the Amrezy palette does have a nice cool tone to it. This one also does, but I do think that Amrezy might be a little cooler. The KKW Beauty Mario palette also had this color right here that I was able to match it up to, which was kind of a pretty nice spot on match as well. So I did find this one in multiple palettes. So that is a color that I do feel like I own. It's not something that is extremely unique to my collection. But then if we jump over to the next one, this is a black shade and the color is called BK inside of the Amrezy palette. And I will tell you guys that usually in my Anastasia palette, something that I usually am missing is a black. And I don't own the Soft Glam, and I feel like the Soft Glam is one of the palettes that has a black, but I skipped out on that one. So I didn't have a black in Anastasia. But if you have the Soft Glam, I believe there is a black in that one. So I had to reference it into Tati Beauty, and I picked the color Memory inside of the Tati Beauty palette. This is a fantastic black, so I really like the black in here. So a black shade inside of an Anastasia palette is not going to sell me. I do like the Anastasia formula, not enough, but I do have other blacks in other formulas but I do have black in a lot of palettes and a lot of really good blacks, including Charlotte Tilbury, and the Tati Beauty one is pretty damn good as well. So those blacks are good enough for me, so that's not going to sell me on this palette. Then we have the next color, which is called 1988. This was one of the hardest colors for me to find, and you guys may say, well, this is just a brown, because I felt like it looked cool tone, but then at the same time, in some of the swatches, I felt like it had a little bit of warmth to it. When I was looking into the palettes, I was really looking for that perfect shade that really matched it, and I had a very difficult time finding this shade. This is probably one of the hardest shades that I had finding inside of this palette. Like, it really was difficult. I feel like I was able to find a color inside of Metropolis that would have matched it a little bit better. But in order to stay to the Anastasia range, I did grab the Carli Bybel palette. And that's this color right here called Boy. And then if you put a little bit of chai together, so if you put them both together, if you grab them at the same time. So I was able to make this one using the Carli Bybel. Like I did say, in the Metropolis palette, you may be able to find something a little bit closer without having to mix like I had to with this palette. Super easy to find. It gave me the hardest time. So then if we go on Chisme, I think it's called Chisme, and this is a very typical Anastasia color. I feel like I see this color very often in Anastasia. So I was able to get it pretty closely within the Modern Renaissance. If you look at Venetian Red has a very similar hue to this tone that's inside of this brand new Amrezy palette. I do feel like when it comes to these kind of like burgundy-ish red colors, there isn't like that much room to go in. So a lot of brands tend to always do that similar hue. I do feel like I have that one also in the Tati Beauty Poet shade. This was a very similar hue to the one that I found in Modern Renaissance. So, and then also within the Carli Bybel, there's also this color Stev. Stev is a little bit more red, but we've got a lot of those type of hues going. And so for me, this shade itself, not unique enough. It's a beautiful shade, nice in the palette, but not something that I really need at all. Okay, so now this one is called OG. And actually on the Sephora website, it says Cupcake, but it's not, it's OG. So this one right here is a very typical transitional shade to me. I feel like this one, particularly in the Amrezy palette, may have a little bit more yellow-orange undertone to it than the typical taupe shades that we usually see as a transition. But I do feel like inside of the Carli Bybel palette, there's this color Chai. I don't feel like OG is one of those colors that's really gonna make me want to buy it. it. Now, I will also point out to you that for me personally, when those transitional shades have a little bit more yellow or orange to them, I don't love them as much as when they're a little bit cooler. So that to me was already kind of like one of those determining factors that I kind of went like, if this one goes even a little bit more yellow than chai, I don't know if I would like it, to be honest. I don't know if it would be like, wow, because I do feel like one of the palettes that does that a lot to me is the Metropolis palette, and sometimes even with the Metropolis palette, I'm like, that goes a little too orange for me. That's a little bit too yellow. So that was one of those shades that I was kind of like, but we have a lot more to go, so we can go positive here. This can still turn around for me, and I can still say this is so worth it at this point because there's a lot more. There's so many shades in here. So the next shade is called New Yorker with the Y, so it's like New Yorker. I don't know. I'm not from New York, so I don't know. It's something like New York, not New York. I don't know how they say it. But anyways, so this color was another one that I feel like it has a little bit more of that yellow orange undertone. That's not my favorite, but there is a color inside of Modern Renaissance, and it's this one called Raw Sienna. I do think that maybe the one in the Amrezy might be a little deeper than this one, and I will be honest with you guys, if you guys look at my Anastasia palette, one of the shades, which you probably can't even tell that much, that I hardly use is Raw Sienna. So that's another one that kind of made me go, I'm not sure. So if we keep on going, and now we're going to get into like more of like the glitzy kind of shades, or the shades that are more unique, because I feel like she had a bunch of base shades in here, which is fantastic if you don't own a lot of these like other palettes that have a lot of base shades in it. Then that could be fantastic for you. But for me, that I have a lot of these shadow palettes that have like those type of base shades in it, it's not unique, do you know? Or if you're somebody who likes like those yellow undertoned mattes, you might actually like some of those hues that I just spoke about. But if we keep on going, the next color is Anastasia, and I like this color. This color is beautiful to me, and I feel like I just finished seeing it because in the Carli Bybel palette, I feel like this color called Aurora has a very similar swatch to this one. I didn't have to mix it or anything, and when I swatched it, I said, gosh, this looks kind of similar. Like this one might even be a little bit pinker. Maybe the one in the Amrezy is a little bit peacher, but they look kind of the same. I don't know. To me, they look kind of the same. And if it goes a little bit peacher, I do have the Sunset palette that has a little bit more peacher hues in it. But I do feel like in the swatch, they matched up. So they can't be exactly the same because they're both coming from Anastasia palettes, but they may be so similar that it might not be worth it to me to want to buy the new Amrezy palette if I had the Carli Bybel one so far. So if we keep on going, one of the other colors that really, really is beautiful and I really like is called Reezy. And Reezy is a really cute, like pink kind of metallic-y hue. And that's kind of the color that I have all over my lid, but the one that I'm using is from the Riviera palette, and I jumped into this color called Palermo. I do feel like these swatch very similar as well. So this color hue may be almost spot on. The thing that I think might be different between some of these shadows is going to be the formula. I do know that some of these have a little bit more glitter in the Amrezy palettes than in these other palettes, but glitter is not going to sell me on palettes because I'm not a huge glittery person, you know? So if you really love glitters and you have these other palettes and you don't feel like they're glittery enough, maybe you will love the Amrezy one. So that is the first 8. At this point right now, I'm like, okay, I like this palette, but I have it. Like I have a lot of very similar hues and I don't feel like it's unique enough for me to really want to go out and grab. Like it's just not. So now this next 8 has to be like that point that makes me go, yeah. Let's see if that happens. So if we keep on going, the next shade is actually one that I think is very unique and I don't feel like I was able to really find it, and that is called Wasted. Now, I saw her swatch this palette and I saw Wasted swatched, and I don't feel like I have anything very similar to what she showed on screen. So it looks like it is like a pinkish white color that doesn't have that much glitter and is a little bit more of a matte formula. The only thing that really reminds me a lot of it is this color called Soothe from the Tati Beauty palette. That's actually like one of those glitters that it's like a matte but it has glitters in it. Kind of what reminded me of this. When I saw it, I said that kind of reminds me of the Tati Beauty palette, that it was a little bit more matte, but you do see a few sparkles here and there. I'm not 100% sure if this one is going to be the same. This is one that was a little bit more intriguing for me because I was kind of like, that's an interesting formula. The problem is there's only one. And if it's similar to the Tati Beauty palette, that after you put on the shadow, it kind of just like your sparkles kind of disappear, then that shadow wouldn't be worth it to me anyways. So that one's kind of like, I don't know, it's like a toss-up. I'm not sure if I'm excited or I'm like, oh no, I hope that people don't start putting these sparkly type of mattes inside of palettes because I don't like the way that it worked last time. The next color is called Barb. It's another pretty tone that I feel like I also saw inside of the Carli Bybel palette. So inside of the Carli Bybel palette, there is this color called Aurora, which I told you guys before. This tone Barb is a little bit lighter. So what I did was I grabbed a little bit of Aurora and then also grabbed a little of Boy and mixed them together. That kind of gives me a more muted down Aurora, which is kind of what reminds me of what this color Barb looks like, a muted down Aurora. I really love the Carli Bybel palette, so if I can just get more use out of this palette and just have to mix two shades together, and now I know it can create that really pretty shade, I'd rather just keep using this one because I need to use this up anyways, you know? Next color is called Liddy. Now we get into some of the glitters. The cool thing Anastasia did here was instead of cutting two of the shades and adding glitters, she added two additional shades to this palette so that you wouldn't run out of just like normal shades. She added two shades and made them glitters. So typically we wouldn't have 16 shades. We would actually have 14. A great idea because not everybody loves glitters. And if you make two shades in a palette glitters, you're taking away a lot of shadows. So I love that they added it in addition and just added two more shades. I thought that was a fantastic idea and I really love that. But the shade that I was able to find and what I used was the Tati Beauty palette because if you guys have this textured neutrals, you guys know you got glitters for days now because how many times we put glitter on our face and now we've got like did was I jumped into Story right here, this glitter, and then I added a little bit of the Poet glitter to give a little bit more pink tone that I kind of see within the Anastasia palette. I don't think that any of the glitters that I found are spot on to the one in the Anastasia, but side note to you guys, I hardly put glitter on my eyes. I mean, I have had this Tati Beauty palette for a while and I haven't used any of the glitters, like only for like tutorials. So 2 glitters in a palette, for me, you know, like it's not like that's not a like it's not gonna make me want to buy it. Now we're getting into the color Cupcake. This was a unique shade. This is something different. This is a purpley hue. Now, if you guys have the Norvina palette, maybe you guys have a similar tone to this, but I never purchased Norvina because I'm not a huge purpley lavenderish person. I don't wear those type of hues that often, so that's why the Norvina one just didn't speak to me. But if you guys have Norvina, maybe you have this. But this was a hard shade for me to find. I'm not gonna lie. I couldn't find this one and I had a hard did. And I don't even think that the shade I found is exact, but in the Carli Bybel palette, I did mix 2 shades together. I got Mandela, which is this purple hue, but since I feel like it has a little bit too much purple, I dabbed a little bit of Aurora on top and made it a little bit more pink. And it does give me a little bit of a pink purple looking swatch. So now when I swatch it, it gives me more of a pink purple rather than a purple. I feel like in the swatch, it looks like it's a purpley pink hue, but it's not like 100% purple. So that's why I add a little bit of Aurora in. I feel like I was able to mimic this color good enough for my liking. Now let's get into another really cool color in the Amrezy palette. That's called Dragon. Now I like Dragon. I think Dragon was pretty interesting. I looked in a few of her palettes. Like I said, I looked in all of these and I don't feel like I was able to find a similar hue to Dragon. The closest that I was able to find is inside of the Riviera palette, and that is this color called Inheritance. Now I feel like Inheritance goes a little bit too yellow gold. So what I ended up just doing is jumping into Modern Renaissance and adding a little bit of Primavera on top to just dye down the gold just a tad bit to give it a little bit more of a champagne gold look. And I feel like the color became a little bit closer to the Amrezy palette. But if you want it to be a little bit more gold, you can jump into another palette like Metropolis. I do feel like in Metropolis, I am going to be able to find this color a little bit better. And I feel like this color right here is a little bit more spot on. And when I swatched this one, it was my original match. And this one matches a lot more to the Amrezy palettes because Metropolis did give me a lot of matches. And I just didn't want to include it in here because you guys kind of wanted more Riviera and you guys wanted more Anastasia stuff. But definitely Metropolis has a little bit more spot on matches, I feel. The next color is called Leo. Now Leo originally, guys, I pulled from Metropolis because I really thought that this blue looked a lot like the blue in the swatch. But then when I started seeing some other swatches come out, it looks a lot more like the one in the Riviera. It has a little bit more green in the swatches. So I actually feel like this Riviera tone might actually be pretty similar to the swatch that I saw. And I didn't think that the Riviera one was actually going to match. I really honestly thought that this one in Metropolis was more like the color. It was a little bit deeper of a blue, but it looks to me like maybe this one is more of it. So I do feel like the Riviera palette does have this Leo blue, but for me personally, this color was able to match up. I also feel like inside of my Mario palette from KKW Beauty, I have this other blue. I've got a few different hues of blue here, and I don't use blue that often. I also have another one in Juvia's Place. That's another hue that's very similar to these. So like the blue tone being that standout tone, I was like, damn, why did it have to be a blue tone? Why couldn't it be something else? I kind of understand why she put blue in here, but we're gonna get into that in a video that's coming very soon. We're gonna be talking all blue, but yeah, so that color is definitely not gonna be the reason I'd buy this. Don't wear blue that often, and I feel like I've got a lot of blue. We've got two left. The next one is a glitter, and like I've told you guys, glitters. So this glitter is called Gemini. Now, Gemini is a beautiful glitter in the Amrezy palette. I love the tone of this glitter, but I feel like I could mimic it if I really wanted to. What I did in this case is I just grabbed a little bit of Inheritance, and then on top of it, I just threw a little bit of this tone right here from Soothe and Tati Beauty just to give it that glitter. And because the undertone was gold and I put this glitter on top, it kind of gave me like a hue of this goldish glitter. So even if I grabbed this Soothe color, you see how it's kind of like a gold shift. If you just kind of like pat that lightly over a gold metallic, it is going to give you the illusion of the glitters being gold because your eye is so gold. So I don't feel like I need a gold glitter. So that's a really pretty shade. If you guys like glitter, then you might love that. And then finally, we're on our last shade, and this is Georgina. Georgina was another shade that I did feel like was a little bit difficult for me to find. If you guys have this palette right here and you see Awakening, I feel like Awakening is a very similar hue. So that is in the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. So if you guys have the Sunrise, jump into that palette. But since I wanted to stay to the Anastasia palettes and show you guys, what I did was I went into Modern Renaissance, grabbed on Antique Bronze, and that gave me a really similar color to Georgina. Now, like I said, I feel like if you have the Sunrise, you might find this color a little easier than having to do that, but since we have these palettes, we might as well use them. If you have to mix some colors together to come up with these cool colors that you're finding in other palettes, why not? You need to get rid of these palettes, so yeah, so at the end of the day, looking at this and just looking at all these colors that I had swatched on my arms that have literally faded away, I feel like this is one of those palettes that photographs gorgeous, shelf appeal to me. It looks really beautiful on the shelf. I think it's gorgeous. It reminds me a lot of what Riviera did to me, that it had a lot of cell appeal to it. And I feel like when looking at it, it's not going to be a palette that I personally feel like I would get that much use out of. And I do feel like if you own Modern Renaissance, Carli, Bybel, and Riviera, if you own these three palettes, which a lot of you guys out there that love to collect Anastasia, you may, I don't feel like this is a palette like you really honestly need. You can kind of come up with similar hues using these palettes. If you don't own any of these palettes, or if you only own one, then I wouldn't say it's enough for you not to pick up this palette because there's unique colors in here. All the cool metallics, you definitely can find them in Carli, Bybel. You can find similar stuff in Riviera, but the mattes, you have to go into something like Modern Renaissance. So I do feel like it's unique in certain ways, but I feel like they just kind of like combined a lot of palettes together and just created this like ultimate palette. So if you don't have these, you may actually love that. And I actually like it. And I feel like if I didn't own these palettes, if I didn't have all of these palettes, this would definitely be something I would pick up. So in my opinion, for right now, I've made up my mind that I do not need this palette. And that's only because I already own so many similar hues in my collection. However, I do think that this is very interesting and I do think it's pretty. So I think that if you don't have these palettes, or if you missed out on Riviera, or if you've always wanted Modern Renaissance, this might be a nice little combination of palettes for you, and maybe you would actually really love this. So at the end, I think, guys, I've made up my mind. I really don't need this palette, unfortunately, because I kind of really like the look of it, and it kind of got me excited, and I kind of was thinking maybe I would buy it, you know. But yeah, I don't think I need it. I have a lot of these similar tones in my collection. I could create a lot of these colors, and yeah, I'm going to be skipping out on this one. It is $49 US. They did make it a little bit more expensive, but they did add 2 more shades. But I want to know from you guys, what palettes did you guys look into when you were trying to decide if you should pick this up or not? Which are the palettes that you were able to match this palette up to the best? I would love to know down below. Leave me all of your comments, and thank you guys so much for watching. I hope I was able to help you guys just a little to make a stop, think about it. Don't rush on it so fast, and just decide whether you're really going to use this, if you have it, and whether you need it. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.